Chapter 14 of The Hand of Fu Manchu. The Hand of Fu Manchu by Sax Rohmer. Chapter 14 The Golden Pomegranates. "What was it that he cried out?" demanded Nayland Smith abruptly. "I was in the sitting room, and it sounded to me like pomegranates." We were bending over Lewison, for now, the wig removed, Lewison it proved unmistakably to be, despite the puffy and pallid face. "He said, 'the golden pomegranates,'" I replied, and laughed harshly. "They were words of delirium, and cannot possibly have any bearing upon the manner of his death." "I disagree." He strode out into the sitting room. Weymouth was below, supervising the removal of the unhappy prisoner, and together Smith and I stood looking down at the brass box. Suddenly: "I propose to attempt to open it," said my friend. His words came as a complete surprise. "For what reason, and why have you so suddenly changed your mind?" "For a reason which I hope will presently become evident," he said. "And as to my change of mind, unless I am greatly mistaken, the wily old Chinaman from whom I wrested this treasure was infinitely more clever than I gave him credit for being." Through the open window came faintly to my ears the chiming of Big Ben. The hour was 1:45. London's pulse was dimmed now, and around us that great city slept as soundly as it ever sleeps. Other sounds came vaguely through the fog, and beside Nayland Smith I sat and watched him at work upon the Tûlun box. Every knob of the intricate design he pushed, pulled and twisted, but without result. The night wore on, and just before 3 o'clock Inspector Weymouth knocked upon the door. I admitted him, and side by side the two of us stood watching Smith patiently pursuing his task. All conversation had ceased when, just as the muted booming of London's clocks reached my ears again, and Weymouth pulled out his watch, there came a faint click, and I saw that Smith had raised the lid of the coffer. Weymouth and I sprang forward with one accord, and over Smith's shoulders peered into the interior. There was a second lid of some dull black wood, apparently of great age, and fastened to it, so as to form knobs or handles, was an exquisitely carved pair of golden pomegranates. "They are to raise the wooden lid, Mr. Smith!" cried Weymouth eagerly. "Look, there is a hollow in each to accommodate the fingers." "Aren't you going to open it?" I demanded excitedly. "Aren't you going to open it?" "Might I invite you to accompany me into the bedroom yonder for a moment?" he replied in a tone of studied reserve. "You also, Weymouth?" Smith leading, we entered the room where the dead man lay stretched upon the bed. "Note the appearance of his fingers," directed Nayland Smith. I examined the peculiarity to which Smith had drawn my attention. The dead man's fingers were swollen extraordinarily, the index finger of either hand especially being oddly discolored, as though bruised from the nail upward. I looked again at the ghastly face, then repressing a shudder, for the sight was not good to look upon, I turned to Smith, who was watching me expectantly with his keen, steely eyes. From his pocket he took out a knife containing a number of implements, amongst them a hook-like contrivance. "Have you a button hook, Petrie?" he asked, "or anything of that nature?" "How will this do?" said the Inspector, and he produced a pair of handcuffs. "They were not wanted," he added significantly. "Better still," declared Smith. Reclosing his knife, he took the handcuffs from Weymouth, and, returning to the sitting room, opened them widely and inserted two steel points in the hollows of the golden pomegranates. He pulled. There was a faint sound of moving mechanism, and the wooden lid lifted, revealing the interior of the coffer. It contained 3 long bars of lead, and nothing else. Supporting the lid with the handcuffs: "Just pull the light over here, Petrie," said Smith. I did as he directed. "Look into these 2 cavities where one is expected to thrust one's fingers." Weymouth and I craned forward so that our heads came into contact. "My God!" whispered the Inspector. "We know now what killed him." Visible in either little cavity against the edge of the steel handcuff was the point of a needle, which evidently worked in an exquisitely made socket through which the action of raising the lid caused it to protrude. Underneath the lid, midway between the 2 pomegranates, as I saw by slowly moving the lamp, was a little hollow receptacle of metal, communicating with the base of the hollow needles. The action of lifting the lid not only protruded the points, but also operated the hypodermic syringe. "Note!" snapped Smith, but his voice was slightly hoarse. He removed the points of the bracelets. The box immediately reclosed with no sound other than a faint click. "God forgive him," said Smith, glancing toward the other room, "for he died in my stead, and Dr. Fu Manchu scores an undeserved failure." CHAPTER 15